Hrund Gunnsteinsdottir, author, speaker, filmmaker, and sustainability leader. A firm believer that change starts from within, Hrund draws from broad-based global experience ranging from sustainable businesses, post-conflict reconstruction and development, filmmaking, and the arts, to various roles in the private and public sectors where she has led innovative projects.
Góðan daginn. Hi, it's great to be with you here today. And what a morning, what a first part of the day this has been. So much inspiration, and I keep thinking the world needs more of people like you here in this room and the people who are watching online. You are people who understand and can imagine what the world would look like if we didn't have intuition. What happens when we numb it or close it down? You are people who understand the superpowers that come with intuition and trust its process. But I also think we all need to be reminded of what intuition is and why it's important in today's world. These reminders have to do with the noise that we are surrounded with. And I've had conversations with some of the speakers here today about the noise, a distraction that is constantly hijacking our attention to something that lies external to us. But there is also so much in our societies and systems and culture and the way that we put criteria for success or acceptance that don't support us in following our intuition. And if you think about it, do you feel personally in your life that there is an encouragement for you to take the time off to disconnect from the external world and really connect within? It's becoming much more rare. So my work has spanned different sectors and professions. I've worked in post-conflict reconstruction, innovation, investments, international development, filmmaking like we heard before, and so on and so forth. And the red thread in all of this has been intuition for over 20 years. Very early on, I found out for myself that I felt like we were in some way serving systems instead of systems serving people and the planet. I was one of those early this century who really felt it, that we needed to rethink the systems that we are in. And it's kind of like a big task, you know, it's not a simple one. But I also realized that systems don't change themselves, people change systems. So in a way, systemic change is always going to be deeply personal. So there are many definitions of intuition, and the more that I started to explore the human spirit and what happens inside us and how do we make change happen from within, the more that I conversed with people all over the world, mostly in English, and the more research I did, I realized that we have very many different definitions of intuition. So in a way, it's on a continuum of two extremes. On the one extreme, we have definitions saying that intuition is an irrational impulse and you should do everything you can not to listen to it. And then on the other extreme of the continuum, we have ideas and definitions that say that intuition is our gateway into the spirit world. It's a sixth sense, or worse, it's a woo-woo that we should never rely on because it hasn't been backed up by science. And then somewhere in between of these two extremes, I also found really rigorous, amazing, inspiring research that shows that speaks into mental agility, like why it's important, what happens when we combine intuition and reason, logic and creativity, that these are not separate things, and intuition is so fundamental to our intelligence and ability to create, as you all know. So I kind of came back home to my roots, as we often do, Icelandic is my mother tongue. I come from Iceland. And I started to look at the Icelandic word for intuition, which is innsæi. Because words are magical. They frame, they reframe our thinking, and they deframe our thinking too. And what I really love about innsæi, the Icelandic word, is that it holds space both for the poetic and the spiritual, which will always be the home of our consciousness, and then also for the very literal, concrete, and scientific around our consciousness and intuition. So the Icelandic word for intuition, innsæi, is made up of 2 words, in and sæi. In means inside or into, and sæi means to see or the sea within. So the way that we have worked with the Icelandic word is to propose a threefold meaning. First of all is the sea within. It's the flow of our consciousness. It's this ever-moving, dynamic sea within us that is constantly making new connections and does so at a much greater speed than our conscious mind could ever comprehend. Intuition brings together information from our whole body, so intuition is always embodied, but we tend to live very much in our head. Sorry. Yeah, so shutting down parts of our brains and rooting ourselves inside our bodies, which, for example, happens in a state of flow, enables us to align with intuition. And in those conditions, in this position of mind, we can reach our highest level of performance and our highest potential. So the sea within is this world of imagination, ideas, discoveries, sense of direction, meaning, and purpose. And the sea within cannot be put into boxes because then it ceases to flow. And to live in line with the world that we live in that is constantly changing and flowing, it's so important to also understand how we constantly change and flow. I loved the way that Hrund talked about this morning, about how she's observing the world, her community, through drawing it and making these images for us. She is representing the world we live in with her images. But she also had this conflict thinking, I am observing it, but I also want to be in it. So there's this great tendency for us to explain the world and organize it and categorize it and manipulate the world we live in because we need that in order to survive. But maybe we have sometimes taken it to the extreme. The second meaning of innsæi is to see within. It's how we introspect. It's our ability to know ourselves well enough to be able to put ourselves into other people's shoes. It's our ability to understand what is good intuition from our biases, our fears, our wishful thinkings, prejudices, and judgments. And then thirdly, intuition means to see from the inside out. And that has to do with how we wayfind and navigate in the world today with a well-harnessed intuition that is our compass. So I'm on a quest to get more people to align with their intuition because I think our lives depend on it. Not only because it's key to our mental health, our well-being, our ability to thrive, but it is also fundamental to our intelligence, our genius, our creativity, which you all know so well. And I think we really need to mindfully harness our intuition and align with it, because as I said before, there is very little in our community, in our societies, that encourages us to do that. Like me, you have undoubtedly been in situations, whether it's school or workplace or whatever, where you encounter the view that intuition is way too fluffy and philosophical to tackle some of the greatest challenges that we are faced with in the world today. But we know it's not, because it's actually very solid, because it is our connection with the real world that we live in. And there's another thing I want to share with you, is that we often tend to think that it's divorced from reason or analysis, but it's actually, our ability to reason well depends on us having a good intuition. We need good intuition to innovate, to take good decisions, and to love life. So for the global challenges that we are faced with in the world today, we have the technology, we have the scientific knowledge, and we have the collective resources to be able to materialize sustainable ways of living. But what is missing is the mentality. It happens here. It all happens in the mind, and therefore all in the body, because intuition and intelligence is always embodied. Christiana Figueres, the main negotiator of the Paris climate agreement, has said that the only way out of the mess that we are in the world today is to go inwards, to connect deeply with our spirituality and humanity. And that the state of the world, the state of our economy in the current form, reflects a chronic neglect of our inner world. And this is actually a very big thing to say, coming from somebody who is leading some of our biggest organizations in the world, or was leading some of our biggest organizations in the world, which is the UN. So what matters now is the quality of mind, because everything is doable. We can do basically whatever we want to see happen. But the quality of mind in humans is so important. That is the power invested in the human capacity to enhance or suppress life on Earth. So I thought about a story to share with you today, like what does it look like when we are deeply connected with intuition? And I thought about the ancient Polynesian navigators. Hundreds of years ago, actually their story started about 3,000 years ago. The ancient Polynesian navigators were able to map almost the entire Pacific Ocean without any of the modern tools now available to us. The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on planet Earth. And compare that to the fact that today we know about 5 to 20% of the world's ocean. The reason why they were able to do this was because they were deeply connected with their intuition, and they were deeply connected and immersed in the real world, in the natural world where they lived. They had the courage to go into uncharted territory because they trusted their knowledge, which they inherited through the generations. Their genius also lay in their ability to connect the macro to the micro. So they could read into the waves in the ocean. They could read into the clouds and the behavior of birds. And they could see if there was a shadow on a cloud in the distance, which meant that there was probably an island below. They could also name at least 300 stars in the night sky, which they navigated by. What is also important about their genius is that generation after generation, they would teach that it's important to have hands-on experience about the world we live in, because the world is always changing, the oceans are always changing, and so are we with it. So they had this kind of mantra, which we can adjust to the world we live in today. And it's this: if you can read the world you live in, if you can see the possible in your mind, you will never get lost. I've had the privilege to work with leaders in the world and change makers whom we have all been very inspired by the Polynesian wayfinders. And we're thinking about how we can change the systems that we are within, and how do we do it with a new mindset, so not with the old mindset. And so we thought about how can we navigate with different stars that we are looking at. What are the stars that we would like to navigate with, metaphorically speaking? And so far, it's been a very inspiring and amazing process, but we also realized that we have a long way to go. So this morning, we woke up to the same moon and stars as the ancient Polynesian navigators. But the difference between us and them is that we would never go far without a GPS. We would hardly go far outside of this building without our smartphones, right? And besides, about 1/3 of humanity can't even see the stars in the Milky Way in the night sky anymore because of pollution. Now that's both a fact, but it's also a metaphor for our growing disconnect with the natural and the real world that we're living in. And it is so evident in how wildly we have overused our natural resources to the extent that planet Earth is losing her stability and her ability to renew its energy. As you know, any talk about intuition or creativity always brings us to the word attention. And we're going through some serious attention crisis in the world today. And it's affecting us deeply and in many ways. I said before that intuition is an embodied knowledge, and we pay attention with all our bodies. During every minute of every day, our bodies take in millions and billions of data and sensory data that we process. Our very focused minds get about 1% of this information. The rest, 95 to 99%, sinks into the sea within us, where our unconsciousness is working really, really hard to make these connections. And sometimes some of these connections come to the surface in the form of ideas or realizations or some kind of feeling for something is right or not right. So it's important to take ownership of how we pay attention, because the way we pay attention to the world is a moral act. What we put in, we project onto the world, we put out again. So it's important to be in control, to be the captain of our own attention. And we actually need to be careful not to be trash bins, right? So just to sit there and wait for anything to be thrown our way without scrutinizing what it is. There are trillion-dollar businesses out there that are very keen to maintain our attention, scrolling throughout the day without thinking what we're putting in. But at the same time, this is actually shaping our perceptions of the world, our feeling for sense of belonging and what is real and what is not real. Our attention shapes human history. Connecting hearts to head could be a cliche, but I don't think it's an overused statement. It's really referring to the fact that our whole bodies and being are intelligent, and it's important that we apply all of us. Because if we are able to connect within, with our humanity and spirituality, we connect differently with other people and the world around us. How we wayfind is hugely important. So my work is very much about thinking like, how can we shift the center of gravity in how we show up, how we use our intelligence, where we are coming from. When I see you and you see me, do you see me? Do I see you? These are all really relevant questions for the world we live in. And creativity is a mindset. It's not a skill. And that's why your expertise is so important for the global challenges that we are faced with. Because sharing a mindset is different from sharing a skill, right? So for example, when we truly see other people, when we are connected within, when we are not merely representing the world, we are being present in it, our brains open up. We become better listeners, we become more creative, and we begin to be able to truly see other people. So we begin to listen to them deeply, and they feel that, they can sense that in our presence with them. And so they begin to trust us more, and they are more willing to share with us unformed thoughts, intuitions that are coming to the surface. They don't feel pressured to share something in a 1-minute elevator pitch. I know you all know this feeling. So intuition is often very hard to express in words and is something detailed, but it's a question of how we listen. So I realized that I'm slightly beyond my time, so I'm just going to run over a few things here This is the difference between being a mechanical heart and somebody who connects brain to heart. In my new book about intuition and insight, I interview some of the most extraordinary people in the world today. And I wanted to share with you a story of Henrik Sala. Henrik is an explorer of the ocean. He grew up by the coast in Spain, and he always dreamt of becoming an ocean explorer like Jacques Cousteau. He went to university, he got a degree, he became a professor at a university in Spain in marine biology, until one day he woke up and realized that he was writing an obituary about the ocean life. He was seeing the destruction of the ocean, he was just witnessing how things had become totally unsustainable, and he felt like he was doing nothing about it. He used to think that it was enough to know the science and then he would share it and that would change people's behavior, but it didn't. So he resigned from academia, and Henrik decided to spend most of his time swimming in the ocean, diving in the ocean, to get to know it firsthand like the ancient Polynesian navigators. He wanted to develop his intuition about the world's oceans. And since then, he and his team have been able to preserve 26 of the biggest marine areas in the world, covering 6.5 square kilometers. And he's been able to convince national leaders to do just that. And we all know how hard it is, because we do have the scientific evidence, but we're not doing enough. And this last piece I want to share with you is the reason why he and his team have been able to move national leaders to action. It is because they have brought them to see with their own eyes, experience firsthand what the ocean looks like. And that is what it means to put ourselves back into the world, to be connected with our intuition, to be part of life, to be really present in the world we live in, and then change it for the better. Thank you so much.